On today's show, we're going to be talking about rewarding contributions to your design system. Is it a futile effort, or are we just doing it all wrong? I'm Luke Murphy. My pronouns are they, them. I'm joined by my co-host, Michelle Chin, pronouns she, her. We're both design advocates at zeroheight, the design system management platform, and this is Design Systems WTF. So I have to caveat that I 100% stole this question from Amy Hupe, who I will reference probably about 10 times in this podcast. She did an amazing conference talk last year at Converge. The video's online if you want to go and see it, all around how our contribution systems and the rewarding of our contribution systems is a bit broken at the moment, which came off a great conversation that I had with Amy. And so I wanted to keep that going in podcast form because I thought that you'd have some good takes, hot takes, spicy takes on this one. I suppose just to start off with, like, do you think it's necessary to reward for contributions to a design system?
Like every good design answer, it depends. I think if it is like quote unquote a side project that you have to fit in, then that's extra outside of people's job responsibilities. So they should be rewarded for doing that.
Yes.
If it's an established design system team that you have a design system role or it's part of their role, then it's part of their job. So then they wouldn't get like extra reward.
They're rewarded in the same way that they're rewarded for everything else that they do.
Yeah, it's part of their job. So if they do a good job, and then, typical merit promotion cycles, whatever, right? Like then but it's not like an extra like bonus, I guess.
Because this is like, not to fully lead the question, but this is like the crux of it, right? It feels like a lot of when we talk about rewarding contributions and setting up contributions to a design system, usually we're talking about contributions from outside of the design system team, right?
Yeah.
Because it's what a lot of people do try and get towards with their design system, that their community is good enough around the product org that you've got folks from other teams contributing. And that's where the discussion originally started when I was talking to Amy about this was, well, I mean, it's really hard to get contributions from these people because, they don't seem motivated to contribute. And also, when we do get contributions, it's just from the very privileged few, usually white, cis, able-bodied men, because, understandably, they have the privilege and the space and the time awarded to them through that privilege that they, can feel comfortable contributing to something without any, I don't know, repercussions. That's not even the right way of putting it, but
without thinking twice, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They just feel that it's part of their remit to do that. And I remember Amy framing this as like, is the way that we're rewarding broken? And I kind of think it is.
Yeah, I think so, because if you think about I think this is the other thing. Standing up a design system, you're like under this urgency of, we need a design UI kit for the design tool, we need components, like coded components. You're not thinking about rewards and contribution. You're just thinking like, let's just get this done.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we should be thinking about how does this fit into the work that we do, and like what part of, like, does it deserve to be rewarded, right? If it's a special bonus. And I think it could be like contribution for the greater good of your team, because it's such a vital, it's infrastructure.
Yes,
not a product.
It's not a product.
So I think it's like even more important. So maybe that is special, so it does get some special merit, however that is. But I'm gonna change, unless you have something
to
say.
Go on.
So we did a How We Document webinar, Dan Mall and I, and we talked about, we did some demographic questions. So
sorry, I just need to pick that name up that you dropped.
Oh. So yeah, Dan Mall and I had a conversation around the How We Document survey, which zeroheight we did. So is that another name you need to pick up?
I don't know. Is that a name drop? I'm not sure.
And we talked about how we did ask some demographic questions, and it turned out to be like 40% women, respondents, which is pretty good because in the tech industry, at least in the US, it's like 26% female.
Yeah.
So that's a lot more. And so then, you know, he and I got into this discussion of like do women feel more compelled to contribute to a design system because you know it's for the greater good? Because like I think a lot of times like
Oh.
women have a tendency to volunteer for things
Hmm.
like because they understand the greater value and they're thinking more like about the community. But I think the other thing is like, you know, people who are so burdened often feel very like almost obligated. I took on the design system because I was like, this is to help the team out. I was already like swamped and overloaded, but I was like, this is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have that mindset. I should be like, it's someone else's problem.
Yeah. I think and I think that this is the thing when it comes down to it is, um, when we talk about design systems are, you know, inherently a socialist concept, right? In terms of we're building something that is going to support the greater good. The whole thing that comes out of it is that this is going to prop up the work that you do and like help the work that you do, and that's why you should contribute it and contribute to it, because you contributing to it is going to help you, but it's also going to help your whole team, which is kind of at odds with the way that most of our businesses are structured. I don't know,
Yeah,
or at least how
because
the reward systems are
I think if
structured.
you think about the way business is structured,
Yeah.
because it's like okay, we need another feature to then sell to customers or expand our client base.
Yes.
And so then your project and your goals become very feature focused.
Yes.
And that's design systems kind of help with that, but not exactly,
And
because it's really like
yeah,
building
not
that.
like
Yeah.
super directly.
Yeah, very indirectly.
Not
So
bottom line directly.
so yeah, if you had to pick between the two, you're going to want, well, some people are going to want, the business is going to want the feature that they can sell, that people can buy.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And this is where it comes down to the rewards, because I don't know if it's fair, because it's more around the folks I've talked. So this is very anecdotal, but most of the way that people get rewarded for designs, for external contribution in design system work, it's shout outs, it's like, you know, accolades by being called out in all hands. It might be some cool badges or like swag, but it's very non
release notes.
yeah, in being mentioned in the release notes. They're very soft ways that mean that the motivation that is there is not, let me see if I can get this the right way, an extrinsic motivation. It's not, you're not getting any kind of like significant external reward for doing this, which is very different to your day-to-day job, because it's like, if you do really good on releasing your product, if you on the feature that you're doing, because you have goals, you have OKRs, you have everything like that, if you do really well on those and you perform well on those, you will get a salary increase, you will get a promotion, you might get a bonus based off of your like metrics and your OKRs. And so it kind of feels like that these two things, they end up being like, it's always going to be a second class citizen contributing to a design system.
Yeah, it's like at odds with each other. It's
Yeah.
like contributing is like a second class thing, but it's so important that
Yeah.
it should be rewarded as like a very important thing. It's infrastructure. Like if you don't have your utilities, how are you going to do anything?
Which I suppose, and I think that's the thing, I think we're in agreement here,
Yeah,
possibly.
I think so.
In that, when it comes down to it, I do think that the way that we should be rewarding people for contributing to design systems is the same way that we reward them for doing their core work, in the fact that if your design system relies on external contribution and is only going to grow through external contribution, then you need to have that as part of their core work, and you need to reward it in the same way as their core work. And I think, you know, I don't know, the best way that I found in the past, not to solutionize here, but the best way I found in the past is make it part of core product org OKRs, which is a whole nother problem of getting it to that point.
Yeah, I feel like it's easier said than done, because
Yeah.
I feel like if you're going to make that part of the job description, like maybe the people team wants to get involved and ensure fairness and all this other stuff. But I guess like
That's fine.
maybe, yeah, maybe we're not like, what if you're in a team that doesn't have the luxury of making it part of the core role, that you're
Yeah.
just like, we need some components like ASAP. Can you take on this extra work? Like, should we reward those people? How should they get rewarded? Like, what are like a release notes, shout out? I don't know. Like, is there a better way to reward people? I don't know if you all want to be rewarded differently. It'd be kind of
It'd be
interesting to
really
hear.
good to
Yeah.
hear if anybody, yeah, if anybody has had a reward that they actually really valued, because I think that I think when it comes down to that, it comes down to individual motivations, and that's when it comes back to that diversity problem, where if you're rewarding people in a way that is of lesser value than the way that they're typically rewarded for their work, then you're going to get people who have the comfort and the safety to work on things where they don't need that extra
Yeah.
reward, or they're not motivated by that. Which does come down to an individual mindset thing sometimes, but I do also think that usually there's going to be markers there of who will contribute, and I'm sure that there are folks who work on big design systems who can back that up with actual data. Hey, Howie Document might be able to help
Yeah. You can ask that.
this year. But yeah, I do think that, like, I think money talks.
Yeah. Yeah. Money talks. Always ask for more money. Unless it's gonna get you laid off.
Hey,
I don't know.
if you can swing it in your org and you say, hey, every contribution you make, you'll get an extra, I don't know, $100 in your pay packet this month. I don't know. That might be a good way. It could be a cool test to do. Might also bankrupt your company. But...
Do you think that's gonna get like your design system bloated, or do you feel like that's gonna like what happens if like person A is just like, oh my gosh, if I like realizes that this is a great money making scheme, I'm just gonna like every week make components. Like they make 5, like 1 component a day. Like, so in a month they make like 25.
Yeah.
Um,
I do think that
I
do think when it comes down to it, the best thing to do is probably bake it into your core product work if you can.
Yeah.
And which is not an easy thing to do. Maybe that's a future episode question. Is how do you actually go about doing that? Because you do have to do that from a top down. That can never be bottom up. You need to make sure that you've got buy-in from the very top to make that happen, which is not easy. Like, I'm not going to pretend it is. But I think then it's like the reality might be, hey, maybe we can't rely on contributions, or at least like we can't expect the success of our design system and the growth of our design system is not dependent on that.
Yeah.
That's an extra nice to have. Or maybe it is just about teaching people about socialism. That's, like, start from the beginning, teach your product org about why socialism is great and the greater good is a good thing to think about. Again, I don't know, years of systemic training. Can we unteach that?
Command Z. Yeah. I think that's like a lot of unpacking that we have to, like, unlearning that has to get done. But I think it's possible, like changing people's behaviors. And then I think when people see that change actually benefit, then they can build trust, and we can slowly change the world.
I do think that, and
one
I think
component at a time.
There's some good comments in here around motivating product teams to actively contribute to the DS, and difficulty around like convincing the wider product org, which I said, it's not an easy thing. But I do think that part of this is around what we were talking about last week around building community. And I think one of the key things around it is making sure you're not just focusing on the executors, so not focusing on the designers and the engineers, but also including the product folks in there, and making sure that the PMs, like, doing as much as you can to educate and get buy-in from the PMs, can just make this job a lot easier. Because if they understand, if they can be taught the value of it, it's going to be a lot easier to then convince them to carve out some time. And hey, we've got examples of this working in the past.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Every single product squad I've ever worked on, the engineers have had, at least 10 to 20% of their time sort of squirreled away for tech debt, which is basically, what design systems are: preventative tech and design debt.
Yeah. Or it fixes tech debt.
There's a, yeah, it
Yeah.
either fixes
Yeah.
tech debt or it's making sure that we don't have tech debt in the future.
That's probably a better, yeah.
Yeah, it's oh, it's an interest. Oh, socialism, capitalism. That's the problem. That's the actual problem. It's just that we live in a capitalist society.
So how do you convince a capitalist focused stakeholder to adopt a design system or have that be part of the charter of the team and the product?
Subversion,
Okay.
propaganda, and if that doesn't work, just bring out the guillotines. No, I mean it's a really good question, and I don't think I know the answer. Do you have any ideas?
I don't either. I was just seeing if you had any ideas. I don't know if the audience has ideas.
I mean, apart from, I do think that it is like, again, it goes back to what we were talking about last week around talking in the right language to the right people. And so I think it is like understanding the language that they talk in and the things that they care about, what their motivations are, and then working to that. Like that is that is a big part of it. Is, you know, unfortunately, a big part of design system is actually just doing stakeholder management.
Yeah, it's a lot of change management.
Yeah,
And yeah,
figuring out who those stakeholders are in the first place.
yeah, and working toward their motivations, even though it might be a little capitalist.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's I don't know. I tear down capitalism, but I still work for a paycheck, don't I? So,
As long as you know where you stand,
yeah,
like I
exactly.
think
It's fine.
that's
Just
what Mike Montero says in his book.
yeah, which I very recommended book if anybody has not read it.
Ruined by Design.
It's a fantastic one, and I believe he's just written a follow up. No, Ethan Marcotte has written
About unions.
adjacent one, yeah, which is How to Start a Union, which is out on a book apart, which I'd highly recommend, from a talk that he did around the future of work, which is very prescient at the moment with all the AI that is happening. I think we can probably go to some questions unless you've got anything else that is burning to cover.
I don't think so.
You don't?
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into the questions.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the questions for a second here, and this is where I'm going to edit this out of the final podcast because this is the boring bit, and we don't have our moderators checking. Oh, that's a big one, but I do think that's a good one. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I mean, basically, we've been talking about this question, but I do think it's a good one just to cover up a little bit in terms of let's talk more practical. Let's not talk theoretical, and let's just talk practical here. So, how should rewards for contributions to a design system differ when there is no dedicated team versus when there is a team? So, if a global sized company relies on designers to split their time between products and contributing to the design system and then communicating out to the team what designs are happening in their like somewhat siloed products. Aside from carving out more time and bandwidth to allow designers the appropriate space to contribute, how could we make collaboration a safer space? Practical.
That's
practical
a lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions. But it's basically like, how do you do it when you don't have a full-time design system resource? And, you know, are there any good ways to promote contribution and reward it? I think is probably the best way to summarize that. Let me know if I'm wrong, Kelly.
So I think from my own experience, I was put in charge of running a design system team, but I had to make the team, and I had to say I need a team, and I had to say I need people's time because they wanted people to work on it extracurricularly, and I'm like, if we want this to be serious, like it needs to be part of their core responsibility.
This ain't school.
Yeah. And so I was like, so you will give me time. And so I got the time, but I think at the same time, like I was very careful to not give the company the design system for free. Like it shouldn't be created on the extracurricular evening and weekend hours that our employees were going to do. Like that was a deal breaker, because I guess my worst concern is that like stakeholders will be like, oh, why do you want more resources? Because you were able to pull this design system together without any. So I don't know why you need money now. So I wanted them to be there to be some sort of monetary value behind that.
Yeah.
So I really pushed for like, I'm going to need like 10% of this designer's time every sprint, which is how I was able to get that. I was like, if you take this seriously, then you need to cough up some hours. So,
Yeah.
or else.
Or else. And I think that, when it comes, because I do have to say that it is, and I suppose that's the thing, you were working towards building out a team, right? Like you
Yeah.
did identify that that's what you needed. It's a bit of a hard truth because I know that there are so many folks out there that are trying to build design systems sometimes in really large product orgs as well, without having a dedicated design system resource. And I think that it's possible in a like non-ideal way at a certain size of company. And I think that that certain size of company is probably when your design org is less than 15 people. I don't know. That's me just putting a marker in the sand. The more I talk to design system teams and folks who are trying to do this, so not just the teams, but anybody trying to work on design systems, the more I realize you just need dedicated resource is a must if you want your design system to grow and to scale and to actually be effective, like to have that level of effectiveness that we talk about when we talk about what value a design system can bring. So I do think that sometimes actually using that as your focus of what you're trying to achieve, like you were saying, and then talking in the terms of this is what this is going to bring on this timeline, which sometimes you might have to fudge it a little bit, but there's so many resources out there. Shout out zeroheight.com/white paper if you want a really good resource on showing value to your design system. I'll share those in the email afterwards as well. But we only released it last week, but there's some good stuff in there. But the like showing people, okay, this is what we're going to achieve in this much time, and be realistic about that. Say it's going to take 6 months, it's going to take a year to like stand this up to a point where it's going to start showing value back to the team. Maybe 6 months to a year is a long time, but
I mean, it's accurate. I think that's the other thing is like sharing that with your stakeholders to say like, we can either speed this up,
yeah,
if we have that focus, or if we want people working in their spare time that they have within their 40-hour work week, it's going to take 6 months to a year. And then I guess like understand the outcomes of that, like putting those options out there, because they could be like, oh, let's hurry up and get this. You've got my buy-in. Let's do 3 months. Or they can be like, yeah, I mean, 6 months to a year it is. And I think everyone then has to just be okay with that decision. Like no one's going to like it, but at least that's like the expectation that's been set and kind of understood. So then you're not going to push for the 3 months. But I think also once a couple months rolls around, people are going to feel that pain point to want to push the timeline up sooner.
They will usually start to see the value of it, even if it isn't like quantifiable. And I think that's the thing. So if you can say this is going to take this long and these are the benefits that we're going to get, and that is where you can just use some industry white papers, ROI calculators, like they're slight bullshit, but they also they do actually they're based off of data, they're based off of research, so it's like they usually do have a good grounding. And then do say this is the benefit that we're going to get, right? Then you can say to them, so for the next 6 months, 12 months, this is what we're going to sacrifice to get there. Because it's like if you can show them the reward of what they're going to get, what benefit they're going to get, then you can usually say, and you're realistic about this is how much time you need to carve out to get there. That is like, that's the kind of language that usually works well with senior leaders. It's like, this is the reward we're going to get. This is the trade-off we're making now. And I do think that it's basically just being really realistic with it as well, and not over-promising and under-delivering. And saying, and if they come back to you and say, okay, cool, well, actually, you're going to have to do this as an extracurricular thing.
Yeah.
Say, cool, we're not going to have a design system. or hey, we're going to have a shit design system for a few years,
Yeah,
and say that's the reality of it. I don't know.
I think practically speaking too, like if there are like bonus rewards at your organization, I think if you can secure that to
Yeah,
know like, okay, if I can get some people to work extra on this, we can give them a bonus. But I think definitely make the bonus worth it, not like $100
yeah,
gift card, right? Like for hours and hours that they've put into a design system.
proper bonus,
Yeah, because I think that
10% of salary
yeah,
minimum.
like that helps because they are contributing to something that is very significant to the company.
Yeah,
But I wouldn't have them do the design system and then go seek out a bonus. Like get that bonus guarantee first.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna try and do one more question. Because there's a really good one here that I want to try and cover off. There is so much good conversation going on in the chat, and I can only read about half of it. So I'm looking forward to going back and reading this. Please come into Zeros and start having
Yeah,
these
well,
chats offline,
we can put
because
the questions in and then provide
yeah,
responses maybe.
I will definitely try and do that because I want to keep talking about this. But there's this great question here. Oh, it's also from Kelly. So Kelly, superstar today. How do you encourage contributions when proper component flexibility and documentation can be time consuming and our individual designers simply don't have extra time? I've got opinions about this. Shall I start?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think this depends whether you have a dedicated team. So I am going to talk from the perspective of the assumption that you do have at least some dedicated resource, because I do think that if you don't have dedicated resource, actually, let's start there. If you don't have dedicated resource, I think you just have to accept the fact that your components and probably the documentation is only going to get to a certain quality bar,
Yeah.
at least for a time period until you can iterate on it. But again, it's about being realistic. Um, And if you can say that, if you can provide some examples of this is where we want it to be, like this is a pass, this is like a pass level documentation or pass level flexibility, pass level sort of amount of variations, whatever it is. Um, and then it's like this is like A plus, and then this is like A plus plus. That's really good to like provide those benchmarks to the team to be so that they can have something to shoot for. Because I think one of the things when it comes to like how flexible your components are, how extended they are, and how well documented they are, it's kind of like a never ending thing.
Yeah, it can always be improved. It can
Yeah.
always be iterated.
Similarly, if you've got a design system team and you've got external people contributing, I think that again, setting that quality bar and being realistic of people's time when they're doing external contributions, what you want from them is you want the idea and you want the burning need satisfied with that contribution because you have a design system team who should then their job is making sure that then the documentation is up to scratch,
All
that
the variations are made.
the variations that it's extended to the right point, it's flexible enough. And to be honest, in my mind at least, they're the ones who should be doing the testing to see how flexible it needs to be for the team, and then possibly doing the iterations afterwards, hopefully based off of feedback. Because I think that's the other thing as well. You've got to remember that contributions can scale. Like
Yeah.
contributions can be literally a one-word message. A one-word message might be bad. You know, a contribution of shit, maybe not. But a one-line contribution of have we thought about including this with this particular component can actually be a valuable contribution, right through to a full component.
Yeah.
And I think it's like if you can at least document some of those levels, it can give people a guide of like where to aim for.
Yeah, I really like that idea of like different levels because I think when we go look at design systems, we're looking at really top-notch ones like material and carbon. And you're just like, how am I going to get to that level with like no resources? But I think and if you create these levels, you can also share it with your stakeholders to be like, because we have nobody, we're going to go for like D. That's still passing within the
Yeah,
major, right?
yeah,
Like, and then, if we had more resources, we can then scale and strive for higher
yeah,
to kind of really put the value on the design system so they don't get it for free.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's fantastic point. Yeah, like communicate those quality benchmarks upwards, and as a way to say, yeah, this is what we could do. This is what we can do now. This is what we could be doing if you actually resourced us properly.
Yeah, and I think that helps them understand, because then they can't get mad when they're like, why you have been working on the design system, why doesn't it look like carbon, why doesn't it look like material? You'd be like, well, yeah, if you
Yeah.
that sets that expectation.
Yeah.
So
I feel like Polaris might be the bane of a lot of people's existence. It's also very helpful because, helps with our token naming conventions and everything, right? That's how we name tokens, is just steal from Polaris.
oh, I was coming up with my own naming convention, which I will share at some point, in an article or a template or a toolkit. Because I think the other thing is, like, this is totally a different thing, but I believe there's a role for information architects when it comes to creating your token naming structure and taxonomy, and yeah, that
Are we going to do a whole episode on token naming?
yeah, and information architects.
Hey, if folks want that, just let us know. But that's all we've got time for today. It's been fantastic. We've already gone over time. But if you've got any questions and you that you want to fire us about this topic, or that you want us to cover in a future episode, please send them through either via the Zero Slack community, which you can reach at zeroheight.com/Slack, or on X at zeroheight. Or you can email us at community@zeroheight.com. Until then, see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for joining.